And this is set at 0. Oui, moi, c'est mon problème. Je ne sais comment faire. Et où est-ce qu'ils ont. Check, check, check. OK. Check, 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 check.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Library of Congress. Let me start with a shout out to our multimedia crew and to Shelby Sinclair for ensuring that this event travels beyond our walls into other communities this evening and for posterity. It is a distinct pleasure for the Latin American, Caribbean, and European Division to host this wonderful crowd, together with the Haitians Book Club and representatives from the library's manuscripts, prints and photographs, and geography and maps divisions. I hope everyone has had a moment to see the select items on display. For those who are joining us virtually, we'll bring you that later. Thanks to all of you for this opportunity to learn in community through discussions around books, theory, and history. I want you to know that your book recommendations and conversations over the past year inspired the work of Taylor Healy Brooks and Alexis Bracey, both of whom I was fortunate to supervise here at the library. Taylor came to the Latin American, Caribbean, and European Division for a 10-month residency in August of 2021, and Alexis joined us remotely for an all too brief Huntington internship around the same time. Taylor cannot be with us today, but her incredible collaborative spirit is manifest in this event, and I am grateful to her. Don't worry, it's good news. Taylor started her dream job as African-American community engagement and collections librarian in Seattle Public Library, so she's all the way across the country tonight, but hopefully joining us virtually. Alexis, who is working towards her master's degree in library science with a concentration in archives and records management at the North Carolina Central University, is here today in this audience, and I'm so happy to meet her in person through this venue. This is interesting, the way things come around. Together and with a strong sense of purpose, Taylor and Alexis worked to answer a call that some of the people in this room, and certainly some of those who are joining us virtually, made in August, probably even before that, for new narratives around Haiti. They reached out to many of the individuals in this room to consult and develop and publish a research guide called Freedom in the Black Diaspora, a resource guide for Ayiti Reimagined, and a related webcast, also called Ayiti Reimagined, the first Black sovereign nation. And that video features a conversation with doctors Leslie Alexander, Brandon R. Bird, who's here with us, Gregory Perot, Jean-Adi St. Paul, and Chelsea Stieber, who's also here with us today. The webcast helps to engage a conversation on media representations of Haiti and to redirect a focus to Haiti's positive impact on Black sovereignty in the Americas. The research guide expands on that effort and centers Haitian cultural and historical contributions to Black liberation movements in the United States and Latin America. Notably, the research guide includes references to primary and secondary source material at the Library of Congress, including a collection of items in Creole, thanks to the fine work of Alexis. If you have a chance to check out that guide, there's a survey on the left-hand side, and we would love to hear from you. In librarianship, we talk a lot about metadata, or a description separated in specific data boxes. These combinations of words and organizational taxonomies help organize vast and diverse amounts of information preserved on shelves and in archival boxes in the library. However, as anyone who speaks, reads, listens to, or understands more than one language knows, words and organization vary from culture to culture. The act of acknowledging languages such as Creole and including Creole words in data boxes expands the reach of the information we can share about those items. The same is true of conversations like those here today and over the past year that engage different voices in new narratives. So today I'm thankful to Taylor and Alexis and to the Haitians Book Club and all of those in this room who are engaged in expanding the reach of resources on Haiti. My name is Suzanne Shadle, and I'm privileged to serve as the chief of the Latin American, Caribbean, and European Division. I think of libraries as wonderfully cacophonous places, and people here will appreciate the terms wonderfully and cacophonous together, where the content on our shelves speak from many different perspectives and in multiple languages. It's my honor and privilege to welcome you to contribute to that ensemble today. With that, I'm excited to turn this microphone and the stage over to Dr. Chelsea Stieber, Dr. Brandon R. Bird, Shelby Sinclair, and our guest of honor, Dr. Jean Casimir. Thank you all.
I'm going to just do a brief introduction for us and then hand things over to our esteemed invitee. So thank you, Suzanne, very much. Thank you, Taylor. Thank you, Alexis. You were all instrumental in making this happen, as well as the events and multimedia teams, the librarians who curated the collections display here. You provided us with an incredible opportunity to convene here today. For those of you who aren't familiar, the Haitians Book Club formed last year, following the example of some intrepid scholars before us, to animate a series of discussions among students and scholars, both inside and outside of the Academy, on Jean Casimir's landmark work, The Haitians, A Decolonial History. A group of brilliant scholar specialists, some of whom are in the room today, lent their expertise to sessions centered on themes of translation, slavery and freedom, sovereignty in the state, and colonialism and decoloniality. The ability today to connect these discussions to the library collections and to the idea of Ayiti reimagined in this space is powerful and represents how we might reimagine Haiti, Ayiti, and the world through a work like The Haitians. The club may be ending, but our work is not yet finished, not by a long shot. The recorded sessions from the book club will live on, linked on our website and the YouTube page, but we hope the space can continue to foster discussion of this key work. And just one small plug, we're actually going to continue the conversation in an exciting new format on an app called Threadable, which will launch in a few days. So look out for information on that or email one of us if you're interested. Before turning things over to our esteemed speaker, I wanted to say just a few additional thank yous. To our book club scholar specialists, Laurent Dubois, Kayama Glover, Crystal Edens, Jessica Marie Johnson, Chelsea Kivland, Nathalie Frédéric Pierre, Marlena Doubt, and Mamfatou Niang. Thank you to our expert translators, Nadine Mondestin and Nadège Cherubin, who made the discussions available in Haitian Creole, to club participants who brought energy and incisive questions, and the institutions who provided support, including the Princeton University Humanities Council, Vanderbilt University, Catholic University, and of course, the Latin American, Caribbean, and European Division at the Library of Congress for the space and the support today. I am but one member of a remarkable team, so thank you to Shelby Sinclair and to Brandon Bird. You are formidable scholars, colleagues, and co-conveners. I have learned so much, and I am truly grateful to have had this opportunity for us to work together. Thank you. Thank you to Laurent Dubois for his translation, The Haitians, A Decolonial History. And finally, and most of all, thank you, Jean Casimir, for your work, this work, and all of it. And so without further ado, a brief introduction. Jean Casimir is a leading scholar of Haitian history and culture and is a professor at the Université d'État d'Haïti. He's held research and teaching positions in the Congo, Brazil, and Mexico, as well as various posts in the United Nations, and more recently, as Haiti's ambassador to the United States. He is the author of numerous books in Spanish, French, and Haitian Creole, many also translated into English, as well as countless book chapters and articles on Haitian history, culture, and development. Welcome, Jean Casimir.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. And I thank the library for this wonderful event. And I must thank my colleagues. Really, without you, I would not be here. And I want to thank those who participated in the book club. And I have a special thanks for the person who imagined the title, Haiti Reimagined. Our question is exactly that. We do need to reimagine Haiti today. And to do so, I will speak about the source of Haitian life. This will be the theme of my conversation. The international community is the origin and source of the miseries of the Haitians. The Spanish state eliminated the Tainos from the face of the earth. The French state replaced them with slaves, and independence. And after independence, the Haitians flourished and multiplied. Then in 1915, the United States installed the gendarmerie backing up and an administration that reversed this process. Haitian lives degraded to such an extent that the most recent US president compared our nation to a shithole, as most of you know. And the current one declared in 1994 that if Haiti just quietly sunk in the Caribbean or rose 200 feet above it, it wouldn't matter a whole lot in terms of our, US interest. In the 20th century, the US imposed on the country the same model of government responsible for the wealth of Saint-Domingue, but they had to count on a workforce anchored in its peasant villages. So they strangled it and forced it into outmigration. The difference between a slave society and the Haitian one still escapes the understanding of its tiny oligarchy and of the middle classes, adamant in pursuing the ideal of a pearl of the Antilles, a strange paradise peopled by person in chain. During this period, the enslaved protected themselves by carving out communal refuges, their only source of support, affection, joy, and leisure. The knowledge they amassed offered only a blink light at the end of their tunnel of suffering. The hegemonic powers cling to their racial supremacy with means beyond the reach of a small nation. For the Haitian to depart from their founding equality would be suicidal. Today, they face severe difficulties to create an elite capable of leading them away from the templates imposed by the modern capitalist era, as they did in 1804. But they still exist. What is the source of their life? Supremacy, the unwavering norm of modern times. Western nobility and their clergy considered themselves anointed with superiority over their societies, villain and heretics. Their medieval arrogance worsened during the conquest of the First Nations of the Americas. They never comprehended that their new world absorbed isolated individuals and was incapable of integrating structured communities producing these individuals. To survive, disaggregated majorities subjugated in plantation America had to defy the racialization of human relations. In the Lesser Antilles, this struggle unfolded as if in a barracks. The empires left little room outside the fight conducted in terms set by the dominant system. But in the larger territories, apart from the port city where the sentiment of racial supremacy reigned, the slavers did not have the monopoly over spaces where people confronted their abuses. Communal refuges prospered and were never fully suffocated. A universe distinct from the colonial world blossomed and initiated the construction of tomorrows of equality and diversity aimed at reducing the ferocity of slavery plantation. This itinerary did not strike the attention of Western thinkers. Racist value judgments made it difficult to synchronize both processes resisting imperial modernization. History of the inner structures of both plantation systems was underestimated because endowed with much alterity. Seen from the popular refuges, modern thought thrives thanks to the destruction of the sufferers. The workers in the system barely survive by learning its rule as best they can. Mastery of the immoral instructions allows them to take some control over their physical existence. They developed themselves with their own ethic they provide themselves with their own ethics by developing a communal thought and new forms of individuation. Oppressed Haitians developed then two contradictory but indissociable forces. One, to satisfy the demand of the white supremacists in exchange for a survival that was animalistic in nature, when it was even possible. Another, fashioned by the local community pursuing their spiritual and material self-fulfillment. They protected and defended one another without replacing or ceding to each other. Raw existence in the first layer did not annul the preeminence of dignity, pride, and free will in the second. When the slave trade ended in 1791 in Saint-Domingue, newly arrived Africans were participating more and more actively in shaping the local communities. At the same time, the dominating nation, besieged by the outside world, had to acknowledge the importance emancipated enslaved living in the port towns and threatened by Napoleon policies. After independence, this diminutive minority sought to revive the fracture between the two behavioral orientations characterizing either local or African-born enslaved. During the 19th century, the Caribbean region lost its original economic relevance. The extended support to the oligarchic minorities vanished, and the autonomous communities could deploy their potentialities as they wished. Then locally structured counter-plantation system flourished. In 1915, the urban oligarchic minorities promptly offered their services to the US. In so doing, they sought to make themselves indispensable by playing the card of the Latin culture. But the countryside barely took note of any rivalry between Saxons and Latins and of their common ambition to cultural preeminence. The new metropole, busy handing over the management of their supremacy to a recently formed military bureaucracy and recycled oligarchy of expatriates, did not deviate from its course. Its preferences were dictated by its Jim Crow laws and national policy. Big stick in hand, they revived the problems of color prejudice within the public administration. The local interest groups, competing to integrate the public sphere, agreed with them on the need to civilize the illiterate backcountry. The resurgence of white supremacy was completed during the first half of the 20th century. With the destruction of the Caco revolutionaries, the highest honors conferred by the government to their assassins, and the deafening silence of the oligarchs of the port towns. The servants of the US occupation were complicit in the destruction of the nation, as shown firstly by the reluctant reaction of Haitian President Sténio Vincent to the massacre of Haitians and Dominican Black populations ordered by Rafael Leonidas Trujillo. Secondly, in the religious persecution against Vodou orchestrated by the occupation, followed by the Catholic Church and supported by President Elie Lescaut. And thirdly, by the destruction of national food sovereignty in support of the development of the Allies during and after the Second World War. State and government in or over Haiti. The operators of the port towns entrusted with implementing the colonial system told the story of the revolution as one of battles between the indigenous army and Napoleon's troop. They could barely glimpse at the African nations in the colony or at the nascent Haitian nation itself. Racial colonial definitions erased the ethnicities of the oppressed and made them a grab bag of poor whites, blacks, and colored people. The understanding of the establishment, individuals and groups confronted one another came from France. Those groups that confronted one another came from France, were formatted or were to be formatted by France. The Bois Caïman conspiracy was seen as a chapter of a battle opposing French citizens or citizen-to-be. When the Black Jacobins took over the nation-building process, they failed to complete their task, given the bizarre form of colonialism without a colonial nation, a colonized nation. They had colonialism, but they had no colonized nation to exploit. They set out to govern a place with no significant content other than what France was incapable of implanting. In this supposedly French universe, history started on the docks of Saint-Domingue with no link to the African continent, with no past or future of its own. For the modern times, white supremacy may have lost the battle in 1803, but armed with its universality and its negation of any diversity, its empire did not bequeath to a colony. It was destined to win the war in the end. The heroes of this kind of independence were conveyors of instructions received from the metropole. They accepted the conquest of America and private property based on the loot of the continent's First Nation as an irredeemable fact. Similarly, these active citizens agreed to enforce the house arrest of African foreigners and their imprisonment in militarized agriculture. They sacrificed the leader of the Maroon bands to preserve the modernity of the revolution. Now, the people poured out by the slave trade into Saint-Domingue called themselves Neg Guinée, people of Guinea, from the name given at the time to the vast region of West Africa from where most of them came. The history of these Haitians of Guinea has developed from knowledge's exploited community used to resist. They form a new entity structured through the refusal of colonialism. These communities did not even think of appropriating the governmental institutions and of using them to their own ends. They could not conceive of reducing the masters to slavery and selling them to the international market. The state, the normative governmental institution, remained a tool of the metropolitan imperial powers, the angel of death, the antithesis of life. It couldn't possibly inspire the construction of any future. The oppressed established new rules of sociability that parried the exaction of the public administration, and to survive, they gathered in communities structured by institutions distinct from the proposition of the West. The tapestry woven by the communities became the Haitian nation. It was and could not be the daughter, it was not and could not be the daughter of a colonization that thought the destruction of that which composed it. Nonetheless, the daily practices of these local communities did not assist in understanding the origin of the abuses of power that threatened them. These were their Achilles heel. Negotiation to secure workable arrangement with the colonial powers became an exclusive domain of the emancipated slaves and of their descendants, in a domain they claimed to master. During the 19th century, the local society evolved without major interference from the metropolitan countries, engaged in expanding their colonial empire all over the world. The Haitian state expressed the equilibrium between opposed national forces. The executive, the legislative, and the judiciary branches, tired of trying to impose themselves on the popular will without any clear result, resigned themselves to laissez-faire, and grudgingly accepted that the sovereign people evolve as it saw fit. Hence, the nation emerged in the countryside. It evolved through its opposition to the projects of modern times, and in the process, it transformed itself into an actor on the international stage that is into a sovereign people. The 19th century was then an unexpected parenthesis enjoyed by the Haitians. In 1915, the United States disembarked, flying the white supremacy flag. They destroyed the equilibrium of the country and by mandating the primacy of Port-au-Prince. The new empire endowed with a political might was endowed with a political might that eclipsed that of the declining 18th century France, and it has no intention of negotiating its supremacy. Constant quarrels with the 20th century Haitian politician limited, though, the imperial ability of the to administrate comfortably daily political realities, and led to the creation of a superimposed government that could look like the 18th century colonial one if it had a minimum of control over the local oligarchies. In any event, the administration of the state before 1804 and after 1915 operated as a normative political structure unmindful of the needs of the local population. Given their lack of understanding of the model promoted by the metropole, and consequently their lack of control of such a model, Haitians, though aware of the uncomfortable position they were in, couldn't find a way to cope with the relation to this normative government invented by external powers. In turn, the administrative machinery rooted in such interest could not navigate the local power relations and remained a conveyor belt for instruction issued by alien masters. The continuous bickering among the oligarchs and the ruthless political authorities themselves kept increasing and gradually eroded the potentiality of the nation. The question remains, what did the Haitian people do to exist and to survive in such an unstable environment? How could they create their own continuous system, ignoring the views of the alleged masters? Women, community, and nation. Blacks, as fancied by the whites, were transmuted into perishable commodities. Conceived as statistical aggregates of socially dead individuals, the population was supposed to regain some cohesion by adhering to the philosophy of the 1789 revolution. Enlightenment philosophers lit the fuse of the revolt through the Black Jacobins, reinforced the dominant political and economic structures and the modes of thinking focused on rational economic development, followed at the end of time by liberty and equality. This filiation would guarantee that the mutineers won't fall back into their atavistic tribal savagery. The process concluded as expected in a failed state, and the self-fulfilling prophecy of the white supremacists was accomplished. Instrumental reason, similarly, continued to work not only to exorcise the conquest or theft of foreign territories, the slave trade and slavery, but also the genocide of the disposable population as collateral damages in the white man's quest for economic progress. The foundational crime of the modern state its role as the promoter of piracy and fencer of the loot gathered through highway robberies, camouflage and odyssey carried out by the heroes of the benevolent accumulation of capital, the socially dead person who perished or survived in the process didn't pass any relevant value judgment that could guide their offsprings. But community and continuity in the Caribbean emerged from the solidarity of the unfortunates who lavished care, affection, and moral support on one another so that they could survive circumstances simply inconceivable. Their relations of solidarity and reciprocity reversed the production of human commodities, created novel autonomous institutions, particularly family and gender. Their value system rejected the modern and racist vision built into the white supremacy pretense. The Haitian Revolution, seen as a feat of the indigenous army, did not have any more contribution from women than the opposition to these changes by its European counterparts. These regular armies shared in the dominant conception of the world, its life system and racial hierarchies. They were invested in heteropatriarchal power, the pursuit of the benefits of private property, and the capitalist processes of accumulation and production. They confronted one another without ever calling into question the intent to destroy or at least muzzle the autonomous societies that stood in the way of the expansion of slavery plantation. The historian of colonial modern state described the glare of the pearl of the Antilles. They took note of women, family, and gender on occasion of deviant and criminal behavior, promoting infanticide practiced by midwives, poisoning of the masters and invitees by their house slave during social gathering, and above all, on the occasion of the Bois Caïman conspiracy. The archives of the official narratives could not focus on gender relation, since a slave, like all merchandise, emerged from the marketplace and circulated thanks to the slave trade. As any animal, it has neither family or gender. To create the institution, the unfortunates had to cancel their commercial circulation and reverse the damage modernity inflicted on life in community. Value orientation that motivated this behavior aimed at structural transformation and were produced in their daily lives and in conversation carried out in Creole language. They bore testimony of a perpetual battle against slavery and its amoral, ferocious, sterile, and unilateral economic logic. The perception of the Haitian Revolution as a confrontation between belligerents in uniform underplays the importance of the opposition between the plantation system and the local counter-plantation model. The institutions fueling the revolution emerged from this private and communal life and flourished through the struggle against the modern state, its objective, and its armies. Values of the counter-plantation system remained invisible to French-speaking authorities. With such blindness, uniform belligerents could not grasp the rationale and impact of the Bois Caïman conspiracy. There emerged Fatima and her companions. They joined in the revolt in a capacity defined in their respective communal structures and impervious to colonial institutions. While Fatima officiated as a Vodou priestess, she could not subsequently wear a uniform or serve in the regular army. Boukman Ungan, considered as part of an aggregate of isolated male individuals, was available as any soldier, and his communal attachments would not even be noted. When we began the history of Haitians on the slave auction block, African nations, their social organizations, spirituality, and culture are erased, and the observer is left with blacks and slaves stripped of their participation in any communal web. Creolization and Christianization, assumed determinate if not total, is the only aspect visible to the masters and their supporters. Their white supremacist idea distorted their vision of reality and discounted a complete universe. But the communities of captives promoted all the desertion, conspiracies, and movement of resistance. The destruction of Saint-Domingue slavery was dreamed in Creole language in these humble communal fortresses. Their community and family altered the very goal of social life. They liberated the merchandise person from capital accumulation and centered social exchange on the maintenance of a dignified relationship that all human beings could be proud of. Their revolution expressed itself in their construction of a global national economic structure. Village communities enclosed in microclimates who are connected by female higglers who wove together the internal market system disdained by the extroverted plantation economy. More than all other actors, the Madansara activated networks of economic and social relationships that sustained the country with aplomb and dexterity that the public administration could only dream of. By the end of the 19th century, they contributed to an apparent overpopulation in a place where a century earlier, the population could only grow through the slave trade. The study of women, family, and community requires an immersion in their archives, that is to say, in their national language and its oral literature, alongside fieldwork that would continue to discover the forms of gender inequality specific to this milieu. Until their role in the construction of the national economic structure is recognized and their role in the political arena institutionalized, the exercise of national sovereignty will remain a mirage, if not a pure fraud. For the oppressed, the goal is not to feminize or communalize the state, but to keep it at bay from their daily lives. What is needed is not the presence of individual or feminine sex in the high echelon of the armies or the reigning bureaucracy, but for the civil and military administration to engage with how communities as structured entities institutionalize gender, how mothers and market women respond to the establishment of their role, how the new life they promoted serves as pivot of the formation of the nation. The point is not to modernize the rural world, but to force modernity to respect what was created in that world in relation to community and gender. Modernity is certainly not equipped to dictate to us our itinerary or our agenda. Conclusion: women and national life. The Haitians received from colonialism two inheritances they rejected with the back of their hand so that they could live as a sovereign people. They refused the assumptions of white supremacy presiding over their exploitation and rejected the hegemony of external trade in defining their material life. They imposed the norm of their community, tout moun se moun, without succeeding in inscribing it comfortably within a reality governed by modern states. This essential value connects with today's cries of dissatisfaction shared throughout the world. Black Lives Matter. The weapon of struggle that emerged from their experience remained modest. They were first built in the cabins on the plantations and the provision grounds, arranged as laku or yard, focused on the maintenance of harmonious human relations. Out of the laku grew resistance group who ended up gathering in village refuges. The population structured a new geography oriented toward fulfilling its need. The complementarity of the economy and organization of the village societies was confided in women who managed the organization of rural market and assured the food sovereignty of the country. Village communities linked by the network of rural markets and managed by women are the three pillars to our jiffy of Haitian reality synchronized in Creole language. Their interrelations aim to satisfy the basic needs of the population before exchanging some surpluses for indispensable exotic products. The port structures with their institution and language imported from France were meant to be places that negotiate the exchange of products with the outer world. In principle, they would also participate in defending the security of the nation against the international community. The nation was born from the opposition of the enslaved to colonialism. Given its frailty, it entertains a perpetual conversation with its aggressors. This strengthens the role of the urban oligarchic categories. When these categories has to break with France, they manipulated the instruments of thought of the international order with arguable dexterity. But in 1915, the rampart created by the Black Jacobins became a footbridge, and the privileged strata took again the role they had occupied before the French Revolution. They transformed themselves into Simon de Sirène, helping Christ to climb the Calvary. Our oligarchies are still dreaming of the reconstruction of the Pearl of the Antilles. But the production of inequality inherent to the capitalist system generates a great diversity of oppressed groups who are connected by their increasing precarity and enhanced nobility. Haiti does not have only oligarchies. And the international community is not only made up of its leaders. At home, before they try to cross borders, the population gathers in the primate city, provoking an unmanageable macrocephaly. The administration of the capital city cannot respond to any of the requests of this ever-expanding population. So banditry has become one of the most effective mechanisms for controlling the restless unfortunates piling up there. The foundation for the nation, tout moun se moun, is non-negotiable. For us, equality is not a goal, but a starting point that defines social struggle and national politics. The union that makes our strength is the activation of our cohesion, producing and reproducing the nation. Our challenge is to understand that and to manage our specific cohesion expressed in our unique language. Jean-Jacques Dessalines' phrase still resonates. When the first cannon shot sounds the alarm, the towns disappear and the nation is standing. Do we still need to search for the nation? Can we embrace our reality and above all, and move forward with it despite its modesty? I thank you for your attention.
think it's
I
all of
think
us.
it's-
We're all hot.
Yeah. Thank you. So Shelby, Chelsea, and I have had a lot of opportunity to engage with Dr. Casimir with his wonderful, wonderful text. So at this point, we'd actually love to hear from y'all. Questions, comments, feedback. Anything that this provoked? Yes.
Oh, I think we have a microphone for you to make sure we pick it up, which would be great.
Wonderful presentation, Dr. Casimir. The question I have is, what role do you think the language itself, Creole Haïtien, has in leading Haiti out of the quagmire it's in today?
Oh, your microphone's on, so you can sit if you'd like.
Okay, that's all right.
Okay,
I will do
by
that.
all means.
Actually, what role do I think that the Creole language has in having Haiti out of these quagmires? Okay, first of all, I would say the Creole language is Haiti. One. And secondly, the quagmire is basically urban and French speaking, and in the interface of both, not in the Creole language. The Creole language, and well, I'm not a linguist, well, no, I regret I am not. But the Creole language is the reservoir of most of our basic concepts, you know, and it is the difference, I would say, the archives of our differences. Let me give you an example that is so common. As you know, in Latin languages, boçal are people born in Africa. In Creole, boçals can be French, Congo, or US American, because boçal is simply a person who doesn't know how to behave. What are the rules of a situation? That's all. You know, in French and in white supremacist categories, you have a blanc, you have a mulatto, or Jean couleur, and blacks. No? Well, first of all, in Haiti, what is neg, period. No? Secondly, mulatto, for instance, mestizo in French, métis. No? Well, in Creole, they don't know what does that mean, because mulatto is not a métis in Creole. In Creole, as you know, Napoleon sent a lot of Polish people to fight. No? They stayed in Haiti and they married, obviously, they were male, they married Haitians. And they have a set of kids, none of them mulattoes, they are red. I mean, mulatto is definitely somebody who is métis, but can inherit a land. You see, so Creole has all sort of, so Haiti cannot move one step forward without Creole, because Creole is Haiti, Haiti is Creole. Creole was created while Haiti was building its existence as a nation. Nation is not a given. Nation is something that is constructed. No, and this is why I pointed out that the villages that are isolated wherever they are, no, they have their life according to the microclimate where they are, but they are connected by female higglers, no? And these female higglers, the villages and the rural market, all that interconnect in Creole. You see? Now, that doesn't mean we should forget France. This is what, in French, this is why I insisted that we are always in dialogue with the outer world. And let alone, we are 12 million speaking Creole, with a few more, let's say we are 50 million people in the world speaking Creole. No, but we need the Black Americans speaking English, we need the Puerto Ricans speaking Spanish, we need the Africans speaking all sorts of languages. We need to speak other languages. So the French is one door for international assistance. You see what I mean? So the problem is that French has been used in Haiti as an indicator of status, not to do any work of contact. It is, well, there are so many examples. A Haitian speaking French, you know, Lionel Kubon said he is not expressing an idea, he is expressing a position, a social standing. He's not saying anything, he's just using some subjunctive sort of thing that is not even used in France. You see what I mean? No, they not use those words in France. Obviously, it's not because they are saying something, Well, the Haitian speaking French is saying that he is speaking French. That's all. You see what I mean? So Creole, first of all, I don't think Haiti is no quagmires. I would say the world is a quagmire. I would say the world is in a change of, is living a change of era. Now we are moving from one era to another. We do not know what the other, we could not possibly know what it will be. No, and Haiti has the same problem you have all over the place. No, but obviously it's easier to signal Haiti, to make of Haiti the poorest country in the world, et cetera, for all sorts of reasons that has nothing to do with Haiti, but they have something to do with the possible cohesion between, for instance, Haitians and African Americans. That is a problem. You see, I mean, not the fact that we are poor. So you see what I mean? Because from the beginning, and in that we must remember our great friend Gérard Barthélemy, he said that the Haitian revolution is nearly post-capitalist. From the beginning, we have been able to sidestep the template of making money, producing merchandise to produce more commodities. You know, I mean, making it. No. We have centered our life on bettering social human relations first. No?
Thank you so much for that wonderful thought. Wonderful talk. My question is regarding women's role. And your
Is
present
regarded what?
women's role.
Women's role, yeah.
Yes. Women's roles is very important in the creation of Haiti as a nation, like you mentioned, like Fatima. Is that role still valuable today, as it seems that women are silenced by poverty? Or does Haiti reimagination includes women today? Thank you.
No, don't go that fast. Is women silenced by you?
Oh, I'm sorry. Should I?
That's okay.
Because you are talking about Asian women, the Mother Sarah participated in the creation of Haiti as a nation. And I was wondering, is those women now, actual women of contemporary time, participating in Haiti as a nation because they are being silenced by poverty? Well, the entire nation is silenced, but how do they see their place in Haiti as Haiti is being reimagined and being represented to the entire world?
Okay. First of all, I must say that even though I speak about that, I go on the tip of my feet or my on my toes, because a certain person I know, the other half of humanity, do not like this half to talk about them. This having been said, what happened is that in our case in Haiti, we must make sure that they do not look for women where they are not. This is exactly what I'm trying to point out when I'm saying that, for instance, they want to find women in the army, they want to find women in the government. If the government and the army is destroying what women are building, which is community, which is a cohesion, which is in French, they call aménagement du territoire. They had reorganized the territory. How have they done that? By linking separated communities, separated villages, by creating the rural market, which is the internal market of the country, which is not in existence before 1804. You know what I mean? That's the creation of the Madame Sarah, the rural market. You see what I mean? And these things is what really is homogenizing Creole. When Haiti, in time of Dessalines, I mean, before independence, one day, a French, Creole, I mean, the son of a French planter, a white fellow, addressed Dessalines, according to Descoutil, in French, and Dessalines scolded him, "Go and speak your mother tongue. Don't speak to me in French." Dessalines speaking to a white man, telling him, "You speak Creole, why do you want to speak French for?" Because at that time, the French do not speak French. People forget that. At that time, the French with Brittany, Gascon, Breton, Occitan, Alsacien, God knows how many languages. Haiti speak one, Creole. And a few people speak French. The administration, why? Because they come from Paris, so they have to get in relation with the Franciens de la Cour de France. You see what I mean? So we have a society with one language, and when you have one language, even if you're a planter or French planter speaking one language, no, you're still using Bosal in Creole in the same meaning that anybody is using Bosal. You see what I mean? And if I can give you an example of today to bring the problem in nowadays, I have a friend of mine who is son of Lebanese, but he's Lebanese Haitian. And his family is discussing about land inheritance as if they were any Haitian. I mean, they're thinking in terms of family property system, not in terms of, let's say, the right to use and abuse of land, because they use the same apparatus to organize the world. That is why Creole is so important. You see, this is why you will not go anywhere without Creole. Who can invent since the 18th century a word like tout moun c'est moun? You see what I mean? Every person is a person. And if you go in the historical data, and Laura and Ibra can help me, you will see, for instance, that let's say one of the chief Maroon, Romain la Prophétresse, one of his lieutenants is a white man, but it would be stupid to call him a white man. Because he's not a white man. White man mean a planteur, mean a grand blanc. It's not mean a petit blanc. This is what we call them blanc manants. In French, des manants. You know what I mean? It's not that they are poor white, because no, they are white, but that has nothing to do with their person and their participation in the community. You see what I mean? No? So all these things are important. Therefore, the problem is to make sure that we take women as women are, and we do not import problematic from Europe and from the US. You see, I mean, we're trying to push you and women to be minister of what? How many? Okay, that's good. I have no objection, even though I don't know if Thatcher was female or male. I mean, the former first minister of England. You said, I mean, is he male? Is he female? That is absolutely irrelevant. Is she or he making an effort to make sure that female in the UK, you know what I mean, have their, that's another matter. You see what I mean? So same thing in Haiti. And we could go forward, but I think this is the terrain that is loaded.
I think we have
one more question.
one more question.
Ah oui, Ibra.
Thank you so much. It was fantastic. I have a question about Maroon. We're just speaking of Maroon before the beginning of your talk. And my question is, do we know a little better the social structure of the Maroon community before the revolution? And is there some relationship between the social structure of the Maroon community and what you describe are the Lacou structure or all this structure invented by poor peasants during all this time to create another nation than the one of the white people. So could we say today that there is an heritage of Maroon life in this poor peasant community?
Let me say first that if I am, and I can try to find out, the word Maroon was not used before 1804. The word Maroon appears after 1804 and is probably a creation of the liberated, of the affranchis. You know what I mean? Before 1804, they are brigands, they are criminal, whatever it is, but they are not Maroon. You see what I mean? Boyer will say, Gaumont is not revolutionnaire, c'est un marron. You see, I mean, Boyer will say that. But before, so therefore, okay. Now, in my contention, I mean, my contention is that whatever you have in Haiti, being African or not, you should privilege, I privilege the local creation. So, and this is why, for instance, I discovered, I must say in Puerto Rico, the role of the Petit Blanc. Because who initiated the newcomers to the plantation system, if not those who had les frères de la côte, those who first came to the country as poor white and were displaced by the commercial companies. No, they were working together to such an extent also in the first laws of the beginning 18th century, if not and 17th. No, they were obliged to have as many engagés or indentured servants as Africans. So those people were working together. And I have read, I do not remember where, but I can find it, that the indentured servants were more exploited than the enslaved at the time. You said, I mean, so you have here something coming together, and this is where they taught Creole to the first enslaved. That the enslaved, as they start being more numerous and how many, I mean, several times more numerous than the indentured servant, appropriated the language and, let's say, quote unquote, Africanized the language. But the fact of the matter is the language is a local creation, etc. So therefore, first of all, I would not use the word peasant. This is why I came with the counter-plantation. Because also the data I've looked would say that in Saint-Domingue there is no peasants. There cannot be any peasants because it's contrary to the plantation system. And after 1804, no, you will not find in the text of law, never mention the word peasant. They use the word peasant as the Spaniard used paisanos. You know, I mean, in French also, old French, you can say, c'est paysan, you are my peasant. I mean, we are from the same country. You said, I mean, so this is why I came with the counter plantation. It's a kind of a paysannerie, no? Peasant system, but created in opposition to the plantation. You need to exchange. It is not like the peasants of Central America or Mesoamerica who produce their coa and everything they need. Our peasant, we cannot be self-sufficient. It has to exchange. No, it's a type of thing. Okay. So this peasantry, in quotes, no, is organized in the villages, in the doko, in the manieles, in the palenques. No, even though it started and has linked with the provision grounds. No, but in the provision grounds, it is in another setting and it started. But this is where women came also. I mean, you have the linkage of the provision ground, the bandits going around, and the doko, and this is what will create a kind of peasantry. I don't know if I satisfied you, and so you probably have it answered.
Unfortunately, that's all our time. Appreciate everybody who came out today. Appreciate everybody tuning in on our live stream. It'll be recorded. Just FYI, you can tell your family and friends. And a big thank you, of course, John. One more hand, please.
Yes, I think you're Yes. Did I have a F or A?